All right, time to talk to Mike Schaefer from Husker247, who was up late last night with a commitment or breaking down a 2-1 loss. He joins us now. Good morning.
Yeah, that was to me that was the most depressing performance of Thursday night. Was Cleveland just allowing the Royals to steal that game
with a bad strike zone too.
Runners on. Yeah, not a great strike zone, but you gotta score when you have the bases loaded. You know, one of those opportunities.
That is true.
That's just how it works in baseball.
Hey,
so it goes.
Okay.
More importantly, to the Nebraska fans, though, Brian Tapu, I learned the pronunciation of it, but adding an offensive lineman to the class, there's been a lot of sort of online hand-wringing, I guess is how you would phrase it, about Nebraska's recruiting with the offensive line, which feels a little premature given that I think they took 7 guys in the last cycle. You got Grant Bricks and Preston Talmua, and I think Xander Ruggiero is going to be a really interesting guy for him. But yeah, I think people were pretty concerned about offensive line recruiting. So a weird recruitment. Seems like Oregon State got the commitment, and then Nebraska got back in his ear and was able to flip him pretty quickly.
All right, hold on. Let's before we get into that, because I know you want to come on here and you want to talk people off the ledge about recruiting, and that's fine. But back to last night, the Cleveland-Kansas City game. I would like you to power rank the most depressing things that happened last night. Was it what happened at the K, what happened between USA and Panama, or what happened on a stage in Atlanta?
Well, the most far-reaching consequences probably happened in Atlanta, but I think I'll just say it this way: if you went into last night expecting to come away with some grand answer of the future of the United States, you probably were a little disappointed. But you also
are we talking soccer? Are we talking soccer or politics?
Let's go politics. It's a political show, right?
Hey, Schaefer, can I brighten your day for a moment?
Please, let's just move away from that entirely.
If you can find yourself in Omaha this afternoon, I know yours and my favorite former Cleveland Indian, Jim Thome, is in Omaha. His son is playing in the high school national championship, and they are going to be at Tal Anderson at 10 and at 1 o'clock for Team Illinois.
Well, that's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
Jim Thome was a big fan, obviously, like most people were. Still, there's a little piece of me that's still a little mad that he left for the Phillies, but he found his way back and eventually found his way into Cooperstown.
Yes.
Hell of a player and pretty good analyst when they have him on MLB Network and the like.
We're talking about the great Minnesota Twin, correct?
Yeah,
and the one-time Chicago White Sox too.
Well,
he had some pretty big postseason moments with they had that one-game playoff where I'm pretty sure he hit the game-deciding home run because it's disgusting to me, but there's that like iconic photo where he's rounding first base with his arm in the air, and I think he's wearing a White Sox uniform.
He was on the cover of Sports Illustrated hitting a home run at Target Field back in the day.
Yeah, well, that's you play for enough teams, you get to be in a lot of uniforms.
Okay, let's sift through any sarcasm here because that's a good pickup for Nebraska, and they've stocked their offensive line room over the last couple of years. Everybody has done the math. This is a pretty large roster, and you don't know what it's going to look like. So we don't know what the numbers are going to look like when it comes to recruiting. So there's a lot of moving pieces. But the month of June is supposed to be the month where Nebraska moves recruiting-wise. In all honesty, what's your general vibe on recruiting now that Nebraska is at 12, but have seen some guys who they were on the doorstep of getting a yay, got a nay in this month?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the reality of June is that it's not just a big month for Nebraska; it's a big month for recruiting in general, and you have to come away with wins for it ultimately to really matter. And they had, Jamarian Parker was the month of June, Malcolm Simpson was the month of June, but they haven't up to quite the tune that you're hoping for. But it's not over yet. I mean, you still have some decisions that are being made. Jeremiah Jones is making a decision on Monday. I believe Houston Kahina Torres is making a decision on Sunday. Aiden Manti is making a decision in July. I believe Chase Lofton will be making a decision here within the next week or so. Just he holds to the timeline that he told me before the visit, and that looks like it could go Nebraska's way. Not necessarily set in stone, but I feel good about it coming off the visit. I felt good going into it. So there's still some critical, players that you had visiting. And then you have Christian Jones that isn't going to make a decision until the fall. Like I think we're in that period right now where the immediacy hasn't had the payoff yet, but it doesn't mean that there can't be some big commitments down the line. I mean, they got Ja'Cory Barney in July last year. I believe they got Preston Kalmua in July last year. They got Grant Bricks in November. They got Dylan Raiola in December. Like we really, really want to get into the nuts and bolts of this is working, that isn't working. They're not recruiting at a high enough level. And it's June 28th today? I just, at some point, we're going to take a step back, take a collective breath, and realize that analyzing the class in the middle of it is not always the healthiest form of talking about Nebraska recruiting, because it takes some time. And what this class looks like in 2 weeks could be different than what it looks like right now, and how you feel in 2 weeks could be different than how you feel right now. I think just let it breathe a little bit.
Dawson Merritt, last time we talked to you, seemed like it was trending the way it eventually went. Was there anything in your opinion that could have been left on the table, or was it as simply as what Dawson Merritt talked about, how he really praised the Alabama recruiting class and just their overall path to what he wants? Do you just take that at face value and you tip your cap and say, well, it is Alabama?
This is going to be frustrating to hear, and it's going to be, it's the reality, I think, of where Nebraska is at. It makes probably more sense for Dawson Merritt to commit to Alabama, and then if he transfers, you can look right there at Nebraska. Whereas if you go to Nebraska, you're probably not transferring to Alabama. So it feels like, to me, in some ways, what happened with Dawson Merritt is you take your first swing, and that's the biggest swing that you could take. And then if it doesn't work out, hey, there's still going to be these other great options. That's sort of how it feels a little bit to me. I think that his dad certainly had a lot of interest in Nebraska, having coached with Matt Rule. But ultimately, the allure of Alabama is still really strong. It's hard to get too worked up about losing a top 100 recruit to Alabama. Nebraska did everything they possibly could. But eventually you have to pay the piper for the past 8 years, for the past 25 years, for the past whatever amount that we want to do. Nebraska's not Alabama, even with Kalen DeBoer. And so, there's a lot of work left to do. I feel like we talk about Nebraska like it's more of a finished product than it is in the middle of the rebuild. And it's still in the middle of that rebuild. I mean, it might have a fresh coat of paint, but it doesn't have a roof overhead. So, I just think there's just so much angst and anxiety, and you can't win everything in June. And unfortunately, Dawson Merritt didn't go Nebraska's way, but it doesn't mean that everything is bad right now. I'm surprised, and I shouldn't be. Just the anxiety that has popped up with recruiting this month.
So it could, let's look at linebacker. It could still turn out to be a really good class. If you have a Merritt and Christian Jones next to each other, it's it can still be very good. One of the guys that is intriguing that you've talked to, what's the Will Hawthorne story, who was here last weekend from Iowa, and it's basically down to Iowa State and Nebraska. He's got me not at hello, but I'm very intrigued by him. What's your gut say about what the process is with the Gilbert, Iowa linebacker?
Yeah, well, I think it's still kind of playing through. I mean, I don't know that Nebraska finished things off this past weekend, but I think they put themselves in a really good position for a guy who feels like a developmental linebacker. I mean, it's certainly not at the level of intrigue and excitement that you would have with a Dawson Merritt. He doesn't have that kind of cachet, but that doesn't mean that he can't play. And he's a guy that certainly fits what Nebraska wants to do on defense. But ultimately, they have to try to close out that recruitment. And here's the other thing: they've lost quite a few guys that they've liked to Iowa State too. So I would not just assume that Nebraska versus Iowa State is going to go in any one particular way. Matt Campbell's done a pretty nice job protecting some of the top guys in Iowa this year, guys that Nebraska was very interested in, and Mansky and Limbaugh and players of that nature. So this is a really interesting one, but it would be a good linebacker addition. I don't know that it makes or breaks anything with the class. Now, Christian Jones, everything feels like it's pointed this direction. You get Dawson Merritt, you could handle if Christian Jones potentially decides he doesn't want to stay in the state of Nebraska. You get Will Hawthorne, it's a backup to the idea that if you don't – but it all just sort of feels like the closer you get to not landing somebody in addition to Christian Jones, boy, that one feels really big, doesn't it?
Yep.
Hey, you mentioned Canna Torres, and now with the news of Tapu yesterday, if the news goes well for Sean Hammerbeck, are you now starting to look at, okay, based on the clash you had a year ago on the offensive line, that you're now looking at that, okay, maybe it's not as much star power, but what we've continued to see this team do is be able to bring in that next wave that they're able to get in young, be able to develop them and have them ready for when they're eventually going to be needed. Again, creating that depth. If you get those two additions on top of Tapu, are you starting to feel a lot better about this offensive line, or is there still some work to be done in your opinion?
Yeah, I would feel pretty good about it. And then you still have some guys from Bishop Gorman that are out there that you have the relationship with that maybe could go your way. I'm not super concerned about the offensive line recruiting because they had such a good cycle last year. And, these guys like Houston, Kahina Torres, I mean, he's not Preston Taumua, but he's, I believe, the number one player ranked in Hawaii. It would be a nice recruiting win. And I don't think it's a given. I mean, Arizona State has made that one, pretty interesting too. And so, and they have their own Hawaiian offensive line coach that has connections, and they're doing a nice job recruiting the island as well. So that would be, I think, a nice recruiting win if Nebraska is able to pull that off. And then Sean Hammerbeck is sort of offensive line Nash maker in a lot of ways, just a really good athlete in a really small, remote area of South Dakota, a guy that pretty much anyone that is recruiting him wants because he's a very, very projectable, very athletic. And so I think that I think those would be two really big recruiting wins. I mean, if that's the core of your offensive line class, that's pretty good. I mean, it's not great, but it's pretty good. You got three really interesting, developable guys in that group if they're able to pull that off.
What if Jamal Banks is what he was last year, 59, 653, and 4? Is he as close to a sure thing of what you're going to get of most people on this roster?
I mean, if he's that, I think Nebraska would take it in a heartbeat. I don't think that you turn your nose up to that at all. That's really good production. That's probably a number one wide receiver, at least in terms of catches. And then, you don't need him to be the big play guy, but can he be steady? I would love to, those touchdowns, if that could be more like 6 or 8, that would be even better. But yeah, those would be really good numbers. I hesitate to call anyone a sure thing. But I like the picture of what it looks like with Banks. He's done such a good job assimilating to this team, immersing himself with this team, doing the things that Matt Rule wants. And so I think that if Nebraska and Jamal Banks can be rewarded for that, it'd be really good. He feels like he's very safe, injury aside, not that he's injured, but if anything were to happen, just because it's Nebraska and that's how these things seem to go. But he does feel like he's a pretty safe bet to be a consistent contributor from, the first game to the last.
I want to ask you, so we've talked, I'm glad Gary asked that question about Banks, because obviously there's Naor. We know where it seems the trajectory for Jalen Lloyd is, and even Malachi Coleman when healthy. We started hearing towards the end of the spring and now in the offseason, Janier and Bonner back to wide receiver. Are you intrigued? Are you optimistic? Or are you, I'll believe it when I see it, when it comes to how he's used and how effective he can be amongst what is now a crowded room?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely intrigued. I don't have expectations, but honestly, of that wide receiver group, there's 3 guys I probably have expectations for. A fourth in Ja'Cory Barney, where I have a hunch that he's going to be pretty good. And then the rest, I have no idea. I mean, I don't know what you're going to get from Malachi Coleman this year. I don't know what you're going to get from Janiron Bonner, but they're plus athletes. They're intriguing. I mean, Bonner seems like the kind of guy that can make some tough catches. He had a nice touchdown in the red-white game. I mean, his versatility is intriguing. The fact that he's willing to get in there and mix it up as a blocker is intriguing. I just think there's different ways that you can utilize him. Does that mean that he's a guy that has more than 12 catches when you look up at the end of the year? No. But is he someone that could come up with a nice play for you in a critical time? Yes. And just think about how easy it is to talk about wide receiver depth in 2024 than where we were at this point last year in 2023, where you're hoping that Xavier Betts and Isaiah Garcia-Castaneda can come back to the team. You know, you're hoping that Marcus Washington can take the next step. You don't know what it's going to look like with Billy Kemp, and then a whole bunch of freshmen and Alex Fuller. Like, that's last year compared to where we just ran through all these names now. I just feel better about that position as a whole, and Barner is a part of that.
Your mortgage is on the line. Who has more catches this upcoming year, Malachi Coleman or Isaiah Garcia-Castaneda?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that
Schaefer, mortgage is on the line. You live in a really nice house.
I don't want to put my mortgage on either one of those. I don't know how people are going to feel about this. I would lean towards Garcia-Castaneda. I don't know what you're going to get from him returning from injury. I don't know how available he's going to be or how soon he'll be available. But this is a guy that has had some flashes, you know, in his career. And then he's also been a really productive wide receiver prior to Nebraska. And I go back to this all the time. Two schools that have done it pretty well in terms of producing wide receivers in recent years, Minnesota and Iowa State, were very bummed out when he chose Nebraska way back in 2021. 2022, 2022. I mean, in that range. So, I mean, he's a guy that I think he's a veteran. He knows what he's doing. You know what you're going to get from him. With Malachi, I don't know what his health situation is with that shoulder. He's bigger. I mean, the potential, you know, off the charts. There's just something, I don't know, something has felt off for a while there. And I don't necessarily mean that in a bad way. It just feels like maybe we're not going to get this big breakout season right now. But if he can just go be productive, if he can give you some good snaps, good reps, make plays when he has the opportunity to, that feels like that'd be a win for 2024.
You remember the Northwestern game that IGC had?
Yes.
Remember that?
In Ireland, yeah.
I do. I remember the catch that he had in the end zone. I remember the fumble that wasn't a fumble. I remember it all.
Yeah. And then we just kind of left. Yeah. Yep. And then last year he got hurt. But wasn't he also on the receiving end? A play that is forgotten in the Casey Thompson era is when Thompson was scrambling around.
Yeah, he's around like 50
and
yards.
chucked it down the field. Wasn't that Garcia-Castaneda caught the ball?
It was.
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah.
All right.
It's been part of some big plays.
So how soon we forget. Schaefer, as always, I appreciate it. Great coverage by you guys this week on everything that is going on at 24/7. Have a great weekend, my friend.
All right, guys. Have a good one.
It's Mike Schaefer. You can follow him on Twitter at Mike J. Schaefer. That was a nice 32-yard